Just to be clear, for the last 10 years I haven't eaten any meat, butter, milk or cheese. But here's why I would recommend eating beef in the context of climate science. At least a certain kind of beef once in a while if meat is something you don't want to quit. Overgeneralized arguments like cow farts are melting the ice caps are not just technically wrong, since most gas is released through belching, but can actually lead to more animal suffering and bigger environmental problems just by pointing out the wrong culprit. It all comes down to methane, and by the end of this video you will know more about methane than you ever wanted to know. Here's why cows don't quite deserve the bad reputation they've been getting. I grew up on a cattle farm, and it's true, cows burp and fart a lot. I've seen it myself. If they wouldn't, they would die. Cows emit around 500 liters of methane a day, depending on the fodder and breed. That's more than 100 kilograms a year, produced by bacteria in their rumen, one of the 4 chambers of their stomach. Humans, on the other hand, don't even emit 8 grams a year. That's good, so now we know who to blame for climate change. Since methane's global warming potential is more than 28 times higher than CO2 in a time frame of 100 years, and even higher in the first 20 years. On charts of food with the highest CO2 equivalent footprint, you can find beef on the very top in comparison to kilograms and calories. It has led to countless articles over the last decades, repeating the same arguments over and over again. Eat chicken instead of beef, eat more plant-based food to save our climate, or that treating beef like coal would make a big dent in greenhouse gas emissions. Even animal activists have called out grass-fed beef for having a bigger environmental impact compared to grain-fed. And it is true, the organic meat in milk can often be even worse in these metrics than conventional, especially grass-fed. Without the energy and protein-rich fodder such as grains, corn silage or soy, it takes longer for cattle to reach its slaughter weight, while also producing less milk. An average cow in the beginning of the 20th century, with around 2,000 liters per year, can't compete with modern dairy cows reaching 8,000 to 10,000 liters. Hence, the methane emissions are much lower per liter nowadays. While almost 60% of the emissions of the global dairy system are methane, the numbers in more industrialized regions like Europe are significantly lower. So efficiency is and was the goal, since a slower growing cow has more time to fart and burp. But does it mean we should banish all cattle from pastures and put them in barns instead? The way the climate mitigation arguments are spun, it seems to point that way, ironically even by the ones who want to protect animals. And of course, eating less meat and more plant-based food is better for you, the environment and your gut. But the enemy here is not the cow and the methane itself. And it is blatantly obvious that grass-fed beef won't save our planet. But neither does a vegan diet. It takes a little bit more than that. And even efficiency comes with costs. What is methane? Methane is a short-lived greenhouse gas with a lifetime of around 12 years. It's colorless, odorless and flammable. CO2, on the other hand, can stay in the atmosphere for hundreds of thousands of years. This is actually just condensed steam, tiny water droplets, just like in fog or clouds. This is a nuclear power plant. People should rather show this if they talk about CO2. Unfortunately, many articles and even scientific papers are using misleading calculations and are not differentiating between fossil methane that was stored in the ground and biogenic methane, for example from livestock, waste treatment or wetlands, that is part of the natural carbon cycle, adding no new CO2 to the atmosphere. So why doesn't biogenic methane contribute to global warming in the same way as fossil fuels? Taking a cow as an example again. A cow burps methane, it oxidizes after its lifetime of around 12 years to CO2. Then it's reabsorbed by plants that are eaten by cows and the cycle begins all over again. The same carbon molecules are recycled, like a banana peel you throw on your compost. That means if the cow population is stable for 12 to 20 years, there's not even additional methane in the system with an additional global warming effect. If we burn oil, on the other hand, CO2 that was out of the system for the past millions of years is added. Every addition has an effect, even if they are steady. And when we cut them in half, it still gets more and more, like styrofoam containers or face masks that can end up in landfills for the next 500 years. The IPCC, which can be seen as the gold standard in climate science, wasn't helping when they threw biogenic methane in this simple formula with CO2 in the GWP, comparing the global warming potential in totally random timeframes of 20, 100 and 500 years, treating natural emissions of cows in the end like burning oil or coal and forgetting the natural carbon cycle. To be fair, the IPCC just presents metrics and the policymakers have to pick the ones most applicable to their needs and goals. We have to ask ourselves, what is the goal and who is it helping? In conclusion, the standard metric of CO2 equivalence that is widely used is not showing the real warming effect. It's like comparing a styrofoam container or a face mask with a banana. What is easier to recycle? And then there's a different kind of methane, fossil methane. It increases the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. After its lifetime, the carbon can stay there, as mentioned, for more than 1,000 years. But not only that, it also adds more CH4, that's the chemical formula for methane, with its full warming potential. Fossil methane comes from natural geological processes like volcano eruptions or from oil and gas extraction, the real major source of mankind's demise. Ironically, natural gas, which was seen as a bridge fuel on the way to cleaner energy sources, can even be worse than coal or oil, especially shale or fracking gas. The amount of methane that is released by mankind might be underestimated by 25 to 40%. How about instead of being so focused on cows, we focus more on our own consumption of energy, buying new smartphones every year, fast fashion, overheating or cooling our homes so we can wear tank tops during winter and sweaters in summer. And yes, also our eating habits and how much we throw away, and other things more out of our control, such as the military and weapon production. No, the solution wouldn't be more environmental friendly tanks and guns. Food waste in supermarkets, short lifespans of products that are often not repairable, advertisements and consumer culture, billionaires playing with their rockets, the fact that Las Vegas is even a thing, or the 100 fossil fuel producers responsible for 71% of global greenhouse gases. It's a long list of contributors, but it's always much easier to blame the cow, especially if you have a lot to lose, like the oil and gas industry. Is it just a scapegoat that now even vegans are riding on? If we pretend this natural carbon cycle doesn't exist, we would also have to call out wild animals like giraffes, deer or elephants for exhaling CO2 and emitting methane, and also humans for their 8 grams a year and every breath we take. So by this logic, shouldn't we limit the number of humans as well? That would actually be the best climate mitigation strategy, but for other reasons. The house of cards begins to crumble, especially when you consider the fact that the concentration of CO2 equivalent in the atmosphere wasn't even rising, according to ice cores, until humans started to use more oil, gas and coal. That means the carbon system was balanced out with huge herds of bison, deer, cows and other ruminants for thousands and thousands of years. But now we have more than 1.5 billion cattle worldwide. Is it finally time for me to turn against the cows? We already reached 1.4 billion more than 20 years ago. Since then, its global population size is relatively stable. That means their footprint is not as big as we might think. The methane emissions are actually around the same level as the megafauna, mammoths and co. in the Pleistocene. It doesn't mean the industry's massive scale and our huge meat and milk consumption is not causing dramatic ecological problems. It does, but it's just not the methane that is the problem here. Our problem is we're not using nature and a patch of grassland as a natural limiter to our consumption anymore. Instead, we are using more fossil fuels to raise cattle, chicken and pigs than we have to, and make them live under artificial conditions for efficiency reasons. In a highly inefficient system compared to eating vegetables, fruit and grains directly. In theory, cows on a pasture don't need any fossil fuels, just like their wild ancestors. By putting them in a barn, we create a dependency. We are causing more CO2 emissions for machinery, harvesting, concrete structures, transportation, feeding them with crops that could directly be used for human consumption, and synthetic fertilizers. More soil degradation for producing fodder, more animal diseases, more hoof and joint injuries, and a high use of antibiotics. The emissions argument against methane leaves out all of these factors, among many others, and instead encourages more industrialization and concentration of meat and milk production for the sake of lowering emissions, putting more animals in factory farms. There are two things we are forgetting. First, is this how a healthy cow looks like? And there are way worse examples. It's pretty much just bones and an udder. And it couldn't survive solely on a pasture anymore because its energy demand is too high. And we keep decreasing the genetic pool by choosing a handful of high-yielding cattle. Is that the solution because it emits less methane? In the end, is that really helping the animals or humans or our planet? And second, there's a thing in economics. It's called Jevons paradox. It describes how an increase in efficiency in use of resources can lead to a higher consumption. We have more electricity efficient LEDs, cars and fridges, and yet we're using more and more energy. Saving methane could just justify an increased production. Modern breeds and feeding techniques have already increased the milk yield per cow dramatically, so we could have less cattle. Yet the global demand for meat and milk continues to rise. In conclusion, technological advancements can raise the living standard, but it's not the solution to all problems of humanity, nor the road to happiness. Substitution of beef. Misconception of emissions can also lead to wrongly calculated meat taxes, increasing the price of pasture, milk and beef the most. Farms with the best welfare standards and the highest prices could suffer the most. More consumers might simply switch to eating more pigs and chicken, because they would be in comparison even cheaper and cause less emissions. Again, who are we helping? Is it saving a single animal, or is it killing a different one that is more likely to be raised in a cage and sold for way too little in a supermarket? Methane is not to blame for our dwindling biodiversity. Problems of factory farming for our society, environment and animals are imminent. Death zones in oceans and lakes through eutrophication, degraded soil, pesticide use, deforestation and increased risk for antibiotic resistance in both humans and livestock. Health problems like overweight and diabetes too, and a genetically impoverished mix of livestock. They are not solved by reducing methane, but possibly increased when the consumer thinks, I'm doing something good for the climate by eating more chicken nuggets. What we actually need, instead of oversimplified CO2 footprints and taxes, are true prices for all products. Also vegetables and fruit, with all these externalities included, calculated for the individual farm, a complete life cycle analysis for every used resource, from the barn to the broom. We should pay more for food. Well, that's an unpopular opinion, but consider this. In the end, we are paying way more for our cheap groceries than we think, and we do through higher water bills, higher health insurance fees and premature death. There's no such thing as a free meal unless you are a hunter-gatherer. What would inevitably already reduce the cattle population and increase the prices? It's simple, keeping more cows in their natural grassland habitat. Less would be produced and less would be eaten. And when the price is high enough, less would be thrown away. What is more likely to be found in the trash? A bruised banana and minced meat for $2 a kilogram, or a gold coin that you can't even eat? Of course, higher prices would have to be cushioned by social measures like wealth redistribution to prevent an inequality of food access, which we already have. And it brings us back to guys like this. And if people would still throw away too much food, that would just mean that they still have too much to give to the poor. Now imagine a politician gets on stage to sell the idea that higher prices, let's say burgers for $10, will save you money in the long run while letting you live a better life. And another one will promise you the same burger for $1 or maybe even for free, not telling you that it's directly or indirectly subsidized with your money and your declining health. Who would you vote for and what would the public do? In the marshmallow test, we saw that humans don't always make the best decision in terms of the best outcome. If small farmers and consumers are not profiting from cheap prices in the end, who is? Most money is made in food processing, trade and retail. Methane is a mitigator but not a solution. Why are cows not completely off the hook? Because of the short lifespan and the strong global warming potential of methane, a decrease in cattle population can be used to mitigate climate change relatively quickly, especially when we are near the tipping point. But with that same logic, we could just kill and hunt every animal we can find. Every cow, goat, sheep, elephant, deer and moose. It would actually help in the short run and give us more time, but what would be different in 20 or 30 years? We might have more efficient fridges and flying cars. Are we really trying to find our savior in the next technological revolution, like we did in the past? In that case, we should think about the Jevons paradox again. Technology doesn't fix our detachment from nature and our disrespect for natural limits. It did quite the opposite. How can we fix the issue by doing what caused it in the first place? It can only be fixed up here. Are we spending more resources dancing around the problem rather than trying to solve it? Instead of encouraging raising cattle on pastures like they are naturally meant to, we are researching how to change the diet to reduce methane emissions, such as seaweed, garlic substances, or additives like 3-nitrooxypropanol, abbreviated 3-NOP. It seems that we would rather hook cows or machines to produce electricity for our air conditioning than just turning our AC off. The solution of an artificial problem, which undoubtedly is our use of fossil fuels to live the way we do, can't be more artificial lives, not even for cows. So how should we do farming? No piece of land is like the other. It all depends on the climate, altitude and soil properties. But what we can do is learn from natural systems. They are diverse as hell. And then we put the cow back in its natural habitat, the grassland. Plant a bunch of trees, hedges and bushes around it and let them only eat grass and wild herbs like they are meant to. And in addition, at most, residues from the food industry that we couldn't use in any other way. That is the only way how we really increase the efficiency of the food system. We can't eat grass, but cows can. No other animal, no pig, no chicken, not even other ruminants can utilize grass the way cows can. Even grass of low quality can be used to produce meat or milk that can be consumed by humans. Only in pastures can cattle live species-appropriate lives in a natural herd structure, managing the grassland with a lot of positive externalities, like storing CO2 in the soil and increasing the biodiversity. And all that without using fossil fuels. It only needs the oldest kind of solar energy we know. Just the poop of grazing cattle can sustain all kinds of insects that feed birds and other species. It's the circle of life that humans have utilized for thousands of years. Maybe it's time for us to go back to our roots. So should we eat grass-fed beef? I heard from vegans animals should just be used for landscape conservation, not for meat consumption. And it's true, they could. But if methane would be bad in meat production, it would also be bad if animals are not slaughtered, right? Unless of course it's a purely ethical debate about eating meat or not. And in my opinion, everyone should ask themselves, what is okay to their own moral compass and what isn't? But ethics and climate science shouldn't be mixed up. From an environmental point of view, there are no arguments against it. And it can be sustainable if, big if, it's done correctly. That implies the animals are taken care of. The stocking density is not too high. It's in a region with enough precipitation so the groundwater level is not sinking. No wetlands were drained that would release CO2 and nitrogen. Older, healthier and sturdier cattle breeds that can survive outside a barn are used. No primeval forests were cut down. No soy, grains or other products edible for humans are used. It's regional and not shipped around half the globe. And the conditions of animals and humans in slaughterhouses are ideal. It's complex. Who would it help if it's simple and a farm in California would save methane but drains the groundwater or checks one or many other points on the list? There can be a way to produce meat that is harmonious with nature. We just have to ask ourselves, how many cattle and other livestock can we raise in a sustainable way? And how much land should be given back to nature for wild animals and plants? Under all the cow poop, one day a bunch of flowers can grow. If we always look for something that can be wrong to ban something entirely, it's a dangerous road to take. Our world is not just black and white. In the end, it's all about the individual farm and how it was produced. Otherwise, we would also have to banish all vegetables and fruits from our diet, because there are vegetable and fruit farms exploiting fresh water resources, use a lot of pesticides, plastic, or even slave labor. And technically, if we all would just stop eating, we would get rid of all our problems. It's not the cow, it's us who is to blame. The only way we can live a better life is if we consume less. Period. Of course, we can look at the big 100 fossil fuel companies, but in the end, they provide energy for us. And if we can't make decisions to protect our environment as individuals, lawmakers have to. And if they don't, then they are not working for the people. And we should get rid of them and not the cows. We don't need anyone promising us hamburgers for $1 when the true price is much higher. Why am I not eating meat then? Life is precious and should only be taken if there's a necessity. There was a time when meat was only eaten once a week or once a month, if at all, and we should go back to that if we want to survive as a species. Otherwise, we have to accept that humans can't change, and we can lean back and enjoy the fireworks of a sky that is falling down.